Oh, I'm glad you're here. This is hopefully going to be helpful. Okay, awesome. Are you all licensed? Congratulations. And you're working on it? Okay. Since November? Okay, awesome. So pretty fresh, which is awesome. Well, I'm going to put a quick, I don't know what do you guys know what they're doing with the trainings next month? Okay. It's supposed to be a whole new thing. I don't know anything about it. But I've loved these classes I started in 2018, so I've been an agent for just over 8 years, and I've always been with Keller Williams here at this office. Actually, I think they opened this building in February, if I remember right, of 2018. So this is basically uh, ever since I started, it was here, and I attended these classes toward the beginning of my career because it was so helpful for me to get different perspectives from different agents. There's so many different ways to find new clients. There's so many different ways to go about it, different perspectives. And so it was really nice to be able to see from real agents in my area, that are being successful, how are they doing it? And so I always wanted to, in a sense, give back to when I had that opportunity to lead, and so here we are. So I love teaching Rise. So I'm not sure what's going on next month, but we'll see what happens. But today we're going to be talking about writing offers, which is probably the most exciting part of anything that you can do as a real estate agent. I mean, there's some listings stuff that's exciting, but as far as the buyers go, this is where it gets really fun, right? When you have a client, they fall in love with the home and you want to move forward and you decide to write an offer. It's really exciting. It's really fun. So excited for you guys to to get to that point in your careers. Some of you are there, and hopefully we can learn something today that will help you when that time comes. But is there anything specific that you guys want us to make sure we cover as far as writing offers goes today? Or should we just go for it and then?
No, because they're earnest money.
Yep.
This few special.
Okay, we will talk about earnest money. Absolutely. Great question.
At
And
the end, you go.
okay, yeah, that sounds great. We got a real life example. What I was thinking to do today is actually pretend like we all have the same client that wants this one house. They want to send in an offer. So figured we'd just go for it from scratch, if that's okay with you guys. And then I'll glance over what the Rise stuff and see if there's anything that we missed from there. Okay, so first things first. Where are we looking? Anybody have a lucky number? There's lots of numbers out there.
How about 2142?
Let's see what pops up. 2142. Eagle Mountain. Let's go there. Let's go to Eagle Mountain.
MLS number of this house.
Oh, okay. Well, that worked out. We found a different one.
Okay.
All right. This is great. Except that it's under contract already. It's all good. We're going to go with this one. This is a great example, other than the fact that it's under contract. But we're going to pretend like it's not under contract right now. And we're going to say, this is the house that we want. This is the house that our client wants. Maybe I'll turn off these lights. Is that helpful? See this a little bit better? Okay, beautiful. On solar, Eagle Mountain. Where do you guys all live? Spanish Fork? Provo? Manti? Oh, you come from a ways. Did you come from Manti this morning? Wow, you're amazing. Well, then I would never have canceled class if you were the only one, especially coming that far. Oh, that is awesome.
I've been Sandy for 14 years.
Nice.
Fairview, and then I went to Snow College and got married there. I worked at the Messenger for 18 months.
All right, now you guys are going to get a copy of this as well. So just know ahead of time, this is a sheet. I don't know who put this together, but it's pretty awesome. Page 1 of the actual real estate purchase contract. What do we usually call that? The rep sheet, right? This is the rep sheet, page 1. And then it's followed by a reference page for each one of those items that has some details. Today, we're going to probably talk a little more in depth on these details, but this should be a good glance for you. Then it has page 2 of the rep sheet followed by the in-depth version of each of those fields. So you guys will get a copy of this. Just know ahead of time. So it all starts with the offer. So you already saw the house. or maybe you had somebody else show the house on behalf of your client, or maybe they went to the open house, but for whatever reason, they decided this is the house they want. So when I go to writing an offer, the first thing I do is I make a new tab and I go to forms. There's a couple different ways to go about it. You can use SkySlope, which is a more automated system. I'm just use the old version, which is the legacy forms. So you go here, if you type in Repsy, you can find the form that you want, which is just right here, the real estate purchase contract. And we're just going to start with that one. And actually, I'm going to throw in an addendum because it's pretty common. We're going to talk about the addendum. So we're going to go addendum to the real estate purchase contract. There are a ton of forms here. Have you guys played around with this a little bit? One of these days, as part of your training, what I would strongly recommend is to, I know there's a lot, so maybe break it up into, spend 30 minutes a week for a couple months or something, but go to this forms library, click on every single one of these forms and read them. I know it sounds boring, right? We're not lawyers, but we do have to understand these contracts. And there are a lot of forms that are unused or rarely used that probably should be used more often simply because we're unfamiliar with them. But these are all written by lawyers in the state of Utah to help us stay out of trouble, or to help a buyer stay out of trouble, or a seller, right? But it's all in that general sense. So I strongly recommend using these forms. Dean reminds us all the time, we are not lawyers, so don't write law. If there's something pre-written that's already here, that's what we're going to use. So we'll talk about a couple of those items that are pretty common today. But that's how you do it. So you go from here and then create packet. If you want to add a form later, you can. But then this will just let you fill out all of those blanks right here in the form. Some of the stuff, very few things, but some of the stuff can be filled out in DocuSign later. But again, I'm going to show you how I do this, and then you guys can adapt to however you'd like. So we'll start from the top and go one by one. So what date do we put here? Right now, whatever today is. Doesn't matter anything else. Today is March 25th, so we're going to put March 25th. Okay. Why is this date helpful? When do you see this date elsewhere? Any ideas? If you write an addendum later on, or anything else happens to the contract that's going to change later on, there will always be a reference date to this date. So for example, on the next form, which is an addendum, the very first, addendum number 1, okay, so not the first thing. Right here it says that this addendum pertains to the contract that was written on this date. So let's say today is April 10th, and I'm writing an addendum to change something. I still, on this first one, I'm going to put March 25th. Why? Because that was the date that this contract was initially written. Okay, so that's pretty much, so that ties this addendum to that contract. So it helps everyone know that this is what's going on. So going back to page 1. So that's why this date matters. Other than that, it doesn't matter. Okay, it's almost like a barcode. Next, buyer. What buyer? What name do we put here? The legal name, yes, absolutely. Does it have to be middle name? Doesn't have to be middle name. First and last name is good enough here. What if it's two people buying it together? Put them both on there, right? What if it's a husband and wife and only the husband is going to be on the mortgage? Whose name do you put on the real estate purchase contract? You can just do the husband, right? And from a sales perspective, I prefer to just do one, because then you're only requesting signatures from one party instead of waiting for two. Sometimes that can be a pain, is to wait for more signatures. So if you can do it to less people, then that's, in my opinion, a lot. It's going to save you a little bit of time, or your TC a little bit of time. Are there any other ways, or is there anything else that could be put here besides somebody's name? Yes, it could be a business. So it could be an LLC that's purchasing it. And then there's one other one that can be pretty common. A trust. Yes. You familiar with what a trust is? It's basically, I won't get into the details of what a trust is, but a family that wants to purchase this property as a trust instead of as themselves, that is an option. So whatever that is. So if it's the you know, the George, I don't know, family trust. That's what you'd put right there. Okay. Welcome. And what's your name? Brandon? Nice to meet you. Glad you came. Okay. So we're going to just John Doe. We wouldn't do buyer of record because you know your buyer. There's no reason to put buyer of record. If I were a listing agent and I were to receive an offer, it says buyer of record, I'm like, who are you talking about? Like, that's kind of weird, right? So with a buyer, you always put the name because you are like, sellers don't write offers, right? Only the buyer's end writes the offer. So we're going to put John Doe for the buyer. He's our buyer today. All right. So on this date, John Doe, the buyer, offers to purchase from who? The seller. What name do we put here? The seller's name, if we know it. I'm going to teach you how to look for it. So if you go to your page, and that's why I have two pages, because we're going to be jumping back and forth here quite a bit. If you do split screen, that also can be really helpful. I'm not going to do that today, but if you scroll to the very, very bottom, right above the agent's name right here, will sometimes show owner. I think because this one's under contract, you know what? Let's just find one that's active. I wonder if that changes it. You know, you could do more digging and actually find out. That's okay. It doesn't help that much, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Oh, it's already up here. We're just going to find a home in Orem that's active for sale just to simplify our life a little bit. I should have probably found a listing from one of our agents, but hey, we'll use this. All right, so pull this up. All right, now we changed our minds. Our buyer decided to go to a different house. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. Perfect. So right here shows owner. They just have on file. Now the listing agent is the one that fills this out. Sometimes you'll see owner of record. Sometimes you will see a name, but I always go here and put whatever's here if it's a name. If it's not a name, I like to go one more step and that's it. If you click up on the tax ID form or on the tax ID number, it'll bring up this page and right here, it has the name of the person. I do kind of find it a little bit funny when they put owner of record because you're one click away from finding out who owns the property. The only thing is that once in a while, not very often, but once in a while, there's been a change that has not been recorded in the county records yet. Maybe they've gotten divorced. Maybe it's only one person that owns it. Maybe they refinanced. I don't know. There could be a change, but it's not very common. But even if you get this wrong from the first, it's not a big deal. It'll be easily corrected later. But I feel like it's a little bit more professional to just put the actual name if you know it. And if you're one click away, then why not click on it and put the actual name? So I'd copy this. I'm a little bit OCD. I don't like to do it all in caps. So I would copy it and then I'm just going to put Rod and I'll take out the initial and Nancy Houston. Is that their name? Yeah. There we go. That's how I would look at it. Not a big deal. If you don't know their name, then you'd put owner of record. And at any time you can just do that too. And that'll be corrected. Yes. So you had the right idea, just the wrong spot. Okay, so that's who you're buying the property from. The property described below they're buying this property and agrees to deliver no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance an earnest money deposit in the amount of what? How much earnest money are we putting down? Could be 1%. That's a very common, I don't want to call it a standard because there is no standard with a lot of these things. This is all up to the buyer and seller to agree upon, whatever you can get them to agree. But what is seen as normal, I would say, is somewhere between 0.5% to 1% is normal of the purchase price. So this house that we're buying is listed for $639. We're just going to say we're offering full price. So about 1% would be 6,400. It's kind of an odd number. So usually you round to the nearest something like $5,000 or maybe 7,500. You can put whatever you want, but somewhere in that ballpark would be normal. What's the problem if you do $1,000? It's low. Yeah, I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Maybe. Now, there are situations where you could do that. And there are situations where I have done that and then gotten the offer accepted, but there usually has to be a reason for that, right? It could be that maybe their down payment is coming from the Utah housing, and so they don't even have money to put down other than what's coming from another source. So it would make sense that in a situation like that, they may not have much money to put down. Maybe you do 500 bucks, right? But the principle is the higher you go, the stronger your offer looks. So if you're competing against other potential buyers, you are going to want to put this on to be as stronger if possible. So let's talk about earnest money for a second, because there's some nuances to earnest money that are very important for you to understand. First of all, when is it due? When is it due?
Oh, wait.
Yeah, when does the buyer pay the earnest money?
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it says it right there, within 4 calendar days of acceptance. So not necessarily within 4 calendar days of this date. It's 4 calendar days of when your offer is officially accepted. And if you have a counter offer and then they counter offer back and then it's accepted, that's the acceptance date. So 4 calendar days after that. So let's just say that this takes a day to do the responses, because it's pretty rare to get it offer written and accepted and everything all done in one day. It's pretty common for it to last 2 or 3 days. So if this was 26th, then you'd go 27, 28, 29, 30. If I did my math right, the earnest money would have to be deposited by March 30th. Okay. What does it mean to be deposited? Like, I guess under our brokerage and how we do things here, what would it mean for them what are the ways that a buyer can deposit earnest money funds? Do they bring cash to the front desk? Yeah, probably not cash, right? Typically a check, but if it's over $10,000, it's going to have to be a money order, or not a money order. What's the other one?
Buyers.
Certified. What is it? There's a check from the bank. The name's just cashier's check. Thank you. There it is. It has to be cashier's check if it's over $10,000. Okay, but that's a common way. But they do drop that off at the front desk. If you would like to, as an agent, you can go pick it up from your client, bring it to the front desk. That works too. Or there's another electronic form, which is my typical preference, other than the fact that it does charge, I think it's 20 bucks. It charges the buyer 20 bucks to do it electronically, but that avoids them having to come into the office. And it can also be returned if they end up canceling. It can be returned electronically, so it's a little bit smoother and quicker. So you can do either way. I don't know exactly who you're supposed to talk to get that set up. Probably Novali, if you want them to do that. But how many of you are working with or plan to work with a TC when you go? Do you know what a TC is? Transaction coordinator. Somebody's job is basically to help you do all the paperwork after they go under contract. I guess some of them do it maybe even before you go under contract. I highly recommend doing that for a couple of reasons, especially as a new agent, because they're going to be familiar with the contracts and be able to help you stay out of trouble. But also, it saves a ton of time. So that's probably the number one most common thing that real estate agents pay for is a TC. And there are plenty that do a great job, but they charge per transaction. So you're not necessarily paying them unless you get paid. So that's always nice.
Our brokerage pays for the first 4 transactions
Oh, well, there you go. Learned something new today. Yeah, absolutely.
at the beginning.
Highly recommend it. Right. But so they'll probably be in charge of helping you gather that earnest money. But it's important for you as the agent to understand your clients are going to have questions they're going to ask you. So it's due within 4 days. They have to deposit it that way. So let's say for this house, let's just say that we're going to do $5,000. In the form of, you could write a few different things here. You could say check. You could do electronic deposit. That's what I've done. Check or wire is probably the most common thing I see. Honestly, this doesn't really matter. It doesn't. Wire is like if they wire the funds from one account to another. So I guess that's what we call it when we're depositing them electronically, although that's not technically a wire, but I don't know. This one's kind of one of those ones where it's like, you just write it and nobody looks at this. They'll look at the amount. They don't really care about this. They don't care how it's deposited. Just give me the money. Right. Okay. All right. We're gonna move on. So address, I'll come here and copy. It's always good to copy just because you don't misspell anything. Although I know how to spell Orem because I grew up here. But if you didn't grow up here, you might know how to spell it. All right, I'm gonna copy a couple things because I know I'm gonna need the tax ID information. I'll look at the zip code real quick, 84097. And then I'll paste in the tax ID number. So this stuff just ties the offer to the property. This is all pretty obvious, right? No need for additional explanation here. Okay. All right, here we go. This is where it gets fun. So 1.1, you guys should very well understand and you should memorize, not in order. I don't care about the order, but you should know as an agent what things are by default included in a purchase. Oftentimes you'll have somebody ask, you'll have a client ask, ooh, are these curtain rods included? Are they going to leave the curtain rods? Are these TV mounts going to stay? Is this fridge staying? Is the washer and dryer staying? All of those questions. What stays in a home? Whatever you guys can agree on, right? So if you don't change anything by default, look at this list, this paragraph of things that are automatically included in a home. Right here in 1.1. I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but there's a lot. A couple of the common ones, though, that are missed. It says blinds, window blinds and shutters, draperies, curtain rods, curtains. Those are all included. TV mounts, not the TVs, but the TV mount is supposed to stay behind. Those are all by default. Fencing, security systems, doorbell cameras, all of that stays unless specified otherwise. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so I take the curtains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, which is a good point. So there's remedies that you can go after them for, but ultimately the hope is that you stay out of legal, you know, you don't have to take it to law. And if it's curtain rods, I don't think anyone's going to go to court over curtain rods, but that is something that you can reach out to the agent, to the seller's agent, say, hey, I noticed that the sellers moved out. They actually took the curtain rods. They're supposed to be left behind. You can talk to your client first to see if they'd be willing to accept money towards curtain rods or if they want them to actually come back and install the curtain rods. Most of the time in situations like that, they'll probably be fine with money and then having them do it. But yeah, there are some remedies that you can do, even if it's after closing. If the sellers haven't moved out yet, sometimes they'll have extended possession where you've already closed on the house, but then the seller stays in for an extra week and then they move out and you find that, hey, they took the TV mounts. They weren't supposed to take the TV mounts. And you can talk to the agent and find some resolution for them at that point. So yeah, again, it's important to know what they've agreed to, both, again, especially for listing too, so that you know what you're promising to give away and your sellers may not be aware. So very important to be specific about those things. And sometimes it can be very easy to forget to think about this because you're going to be seeing a lot of homes. So now there are a couple of items that are not included by default, but of course could be added. These are in 1.2, the washer and dryer, the refrigerator, the microwave oven. I feel like that's a little outdated because microwave ovens most of the time are installed in the home. And so those, if it's installed, it's going to stay, right? But you should mark it here just to make sure. Let's say that your client wants the refrigerator, wants the washer, wants the dryer. Is it included? Well, you can check what the seller's already telling you what they want. If you scroll down on the listing, you'll find inclusions, and right below this will say exclusions if they want to exclude something. So right here, it's a bit redundant, and this is why you got to memorize that list because ceiling fan, compactor, fireplace insert, refrigerator, storage sheds, and window coverings. There are 2 items on here that are not included in 1.1 by default. The rest of the items are already mentioned in 1.1. What items are not included by default? Any guesses? Refrigerator. That's one. Because you guys saw that right here. Refrigerator is right here. Refrigerator is not mentioned up here. What's the other one that's not mentioned in 1.1? Yeah, good job. Storage shed. But window coverings, fireplace insert, compactor, and ceiling fan, those are already listed. The reason this happens is because the MLS form, when you're filling it out for a listing, still asks you if they're going to include the ceiling fans, even though they've on this form said that they're going to be included by default. So that's why you'll see it be a bit redundant. But the easiest way, I typically will go like this. If they're already saying they're included, there is no reason for you not to include them in your offer. The seller's already said that they're going to come with the house. So I would go like that. And then I would just delete anything that doesn't need to be here just to make sure that I've kind of my checklist in a way that I can double check. Okay, ceiling fan, yes, that's already mentioned up here. Compactor, that's mentioned. Fireplace insert, that's mentioned. Refrigerator, oh, I'm going to mark it right here. Storage sheds, I'm going to leave that on here. And then window coverings already mentioned in 1.1, so I'll delete that. I don't even like a trash compactor. I'm surprised that this house has one. Yeah, they're not very common, so I don't see them very often. That's the funny thing about houses is there's still random stuff that comes up that I'm like, I've never even heard of this. What is this? You know, like that's weird. So ChatGPT is your best friend.
How about a freestanding natural gas heater?
Freestanding natural gas
Does that
heater.
count as a fixture or not? Because it's not against the wall, but it's hooked into the gas.
I don't know. That's is that for the water or is that for the air?
Not for heating.
Oh, for heating. I don't know about freestanding. I don't know.
One in this.
It's probably not included. I mean, so here's the thing. If there's a doubt maybe about something like that, it's so much better just to write it right here to make sure everyone's on the same page. Because the reality is one buyer might think that it's included. Oh yeah, it's mentioned in 1.1. The seller might say, well, no, because this is a little different, so it's not that. And then you come to the closing and who's right? And there may be an argument. So it's just way better to put it on here just to be safe so that both parties can see that like, yes, this is included, even if it's redundant. I guess that'd be the only time I'd put something here that's already in 1.1 is to clarify. Pretty much. Yeah, if they have a trampoline in the backyard, you want that. If they have a playground, a play set in the backyard, you can specify that. Maybe you want the refrigerator just in the basement, you can specify that. If there's a picture on the listing, that can help you give backup if you ever needed it, but yeah.
So they're including the refrigerator.
Yes.
Buyer already has the refrigerator.
Aha. Take it. Still include it. Or use it as a negotiation tool. There's two different schools of thought. You can say, I'm asking for it anyway, and then I'll tell my buyer, hey, you've already got a refrigerator, pick which one you like best and sell the other one. And get yourself an extra $500. Or you can say, you don't care about the refrigerator. Maybe we'll go to the seller and say, hey, that's not something that's very important to my buyer, but instead of asking for the refrigerator, we would like to ask for the washer and dryer. And maybe you can do some negotiating there. So if they're giving it to you already, I would say kind of take that as yours and then figure out what to do with it in that way. This is all part of negotiating, right? Very good. Okay, washer and dryer. It's not mentioned here that it's included. It's also not mentioned that it's excluded. So what do we do? Yeah, I would ask their client, do they want it? So washer and dryer is right here mentioned as specify what do you want? Do you want to include it or do you not want it at all? So I would ask my buyer, is this helpful for you? Would it be helpful for you to have a washer and dryer? Once in a while, they'll be like, no, we just got a new one. I love mine. We're going to bring ours. Great. I won't ask for them. Sometimes they'll say, really, it would be helpful for us to have a washer and dryer because otherwise we're going to have to buy one. So you can ask for them to be included. Let's say that right below here under inclusions, it says exclusions and it says washer and dryer. But then on here, let's say that you ask for them and then you get to closing and who gets them? Which one is true? Purchase contract or the listing? Purchase contract. That's where they're going to go to, right? So as a seller's agent too, you're going to want to make sure that you be careful with that. That you're not giving away something that the seller, even if it's on the listing, it's not on the listing, but it's on the rep sheet, then whatever's on the rep sheet is what it is. Because really, if you think about it, the listing is just a marketing thing. It's like, here's what we're offering, but some things can be changed later. So just be careful on that. But that's basically how I would look at it. Let's say that we don't want the washer and dryer, so we're just going to unclick those. Then right here, you're going to click are not almost every time. I don't know. There may be some things. If there's something up here that the seller does not want to include, so let's say they want to take their ceiling fans or their curtain rods. That's probably a better, more common one. Then you can say there are additional items above of personal property the buyer intends to acquire from the seller at closing by separate agreement. Oh, I'm sorry. This is two different things. This one is just saying, more than anything, this is for the lenders. If there's a lender involved, they don't want, you're buying real property. And you guys just went to school recently or have learned what real property is, right? Is a refrigerator real property? No, it's not. So, but that doesn't mean that it can't be included in the sale, but there is kind of a limit. If you also want to include the couch and you're wanting to include the bed and you're wanting to include the hot tub and all of these different things, there may be a point where the lender says, hey, we're going to give you the loan for the house, but these things have to be purchased separately. Okay, so right here, you're just specifying, do you have a separate agreement to include yes or no? Is it illegal to have a separate agreement? No, this is where you're telling them. No, there's not a separate agreement, like a bill of sale, essentially. Or yes, there is a separate agreement and it's here. Like later you'll show that. You'll say this is what it is so that they can check it out and see it. But again, most of the time it's are not. It's, at least in my experience, it's very uncommon for you to be asking for additional things. You totally can. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying it doesn't happen very often. Then in 1.3 is where you'll list anything that's in 1.1 already that the sellers plan to take with them. So this could be like curtain rods. Maybe, sometimes they'll have drapes that, these were made by my grandma and whatever, like their family heirlooms. Great. Totally fine. We're going to mention it right here. Curtains are going to be excluded from the sale. Make sense? Okay. Water service. If there's any water shares, any rights to water, you'll specify those here. If you're doing work within like Utah County area, or Salt Lake County, it's pretty uncommon for you to run into water share. So I'd recommend, if and when you get to that point, if you're dealing with land or something elsewhere that you have questions about water shares, that you find out at that time, but I don't want to spend time on that right now, if that's okay. Yeah, you'll probably get some more down there for sure. I just leave it blank. Yeah, you could put NA, but I typically just leave it blank because if it's blank, it's also from a contract perspective, it means nothing. But I don't know. Yeah, Matt. I don't even know. I I think I've had one transaction that has water that dealt with water rights in my career, so it's very uncommon for me. But some agents that learn more or that do specialize in like land development or things like that, they might have more shares type stuff. So yeah, I apologize, but I'm not the guy for that one. It does for sure. You want to be careful on that, but yeah, just find someone with experience in that can help you. Okay, next part, the payment. So right here, what number are we putting right here? Whatever you're offering, right? So let's just see, this home has been on the market for 1 day. If my buyer wants it already, what are the chances that this seller is going to give us a lower offer or accept a lower offer? Pretty low. And guess who I tell that to? I tell that to my buyers. I tell it to them in the buyer consultation right from the start. Hey, just so you're aware, if the home's been on the market for at least a few weeks, we have a better chance of negotiating price. If it just hits the market, there's a good chance that the seller's not going to accept anything unless it's what they're asking for. All right, that's pretty logical. But that doesn't mean that's always the case. I have an example just this last weekend where we went and saw it. We offered within 3 days, and we're offering for less than what the sellers are asking for, and we're going to get it under contract hopefully today. But it can happen, but it really just depends on the price or on the house, depends on the competition, depends on the seller's motivations, how quickly they want to sell. All of that stuff matters. So, as part of your offer process, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning, but when I have a buyer that wants to buy a particular home, what is the very first thing that you should do? Call the listing agent, right? And I have kind of just some thoughts, some questions about it that I want to know. So number one, I want to find out what is important to the seller. Now, of course, everyone's going to say price, But there are situations where the seller is more interested in closing sooner than they are in getting the highest possible price. So if that's the case, I want to know. So I asked them, what is their motivation? What is their timeline? Sometimes they have specific dates that they're working against. Maybe they're purchasing another property. They're already under contract. And so they need to close this house by a certain date. Well, I want to know that date so that I can tailor my offer to the seller as much as I can while still having the best interest of my client in negotiating on their behalf. But of course, especially when you go up against multiple offers, you're going to need to make sure your offer is what the seller wants. There's no point in giving them something that they don't even want to look at. So, but even if you're the only offer, you still want to try and tailor it as much as you can to the sellers, as long as you're not hurting your buyer's position, because it just helps create a win-win situation for everybody, helps the transaction move along smoothly, and it will give you a better chance of potentially negotiating for repairs or things like that after due diligence. So anyway, so that's my first phone call is to the listing agent. I want to know if they have other offers. Sometimes they'll not tell you, and that's okay. They don't have to tell you, but I always ask because sometimes they will tell you, and they may say there is no other offer. What goes in my mind as a buyer's agent when I hear there's nobody else interested in this home? I get a little happy, maybe, right? What about price-wise? There's a really good chance we can get them a better deal on this house. So we're not necessarily going to offer a full price, or maybe we will offer full price, but we're going to ask for some seller concessions. We have a little bit more strength in the negotiating. So that's why it's a kind of a different conversation. If you're a listing agent, you want to keep those things close to your chest. You don't want to just tell everyone, yeah, nobody likes this home. If you want it, send us whatever you got, that's not the way to go about it, right? It's unethical to lie. Just thought I'd let you know that, yeah, we got 12 offers. It'll be pretty evident within a couple of days that you didn't have 12 offers if you didn't actually have 12 offers. So don't lie. But yeah, I would say when it comes to negotiating, when in doubt, don't tell the other side if it's something that you feel like can harm them. So, for example, if you're the listing agent, there are situations where I've shared that, hey, we're under contract on another property. We would like to close by a certain day, but you have to be careful because that could also harm your negotiating power, right? Why might that be bad? Then the buyer knows that, hey, they have to close by this deadline. Maybe we're going to drag our feet a little bit. Maybe we're going to ask for a reduced price. Maybe we're going to hold their feet to the fire and say, we're not going to buy unless you give us another $5,000 or whatever. So there are some things that certain buyers might want to do if they're in that position. So you have to be careful. But it's important to know from the listing agent kind of what the situation is. Then you go to your buyer and say, hey, the sellers, they do have flexible timing. They're not in a rush. They already have a place that they like, but they're not under contract for it. So we want to present a solid offer, a fair offer for them. Every buyer says, they want a good deal on a home. Like nobody's out here saying, I want to overpay for a house, right? At least I haven't come. And if you come across them, send them my way because I would love to work with them. But yeah, everyone wants a fair deal, right? And so that's why it's also important for you as a listing agent or as a buyer's agent to the next step after the phone call is before you write the offer to look at the comparable properties to see where they may be at price-wise. With this situation, just because it's fresh on my mind, with this client that I'm hopefully going under contract with today on, last week when I did the property analysis for them, I felt like the listing price was fair. And so I told them straight up, like, if we end up getting this property for this price, I think we're solid. Like, I don't think you guys are overpaying for it. There's been these two other properties that have sold recently, one for a little less, one for a little more, and yours is right in the middle. I feel like this is great. But I had asked the listing agent, any other offers on the table? She said no. And so I said, okay, well then let's try and get them a little bit of money. So we offered less. The sellers countered back at a little bit higher than that, but still lower than what they were asking for. And that's the price that we're going to agree on. So I think that's a pretty common way to go about it. And it worked out great. All right. So in our scenario, we called the listing agent. They said, yeah, we've had several showings today. It's been on the market for one day and they're I've been told by one other party that they may be interested in writing an offer. So nothing super solid, but also it's not nothing. So we're going to say that we're just going to offer them full price on this home at 639. You can do 639,900, or you could just do 640. Won't make a difference. And that's the price that you're going to put here. Without even thinking about it, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put this down here. And then without even thinking much about it, I'm going to copy my earnest money and put that one right here at the top. Okay, this is helping me get ready for these other numbers. So the earnest money, this is just a repeat of whatever you have up top. How much earnest money is going here? Additional earnest money, never once have I used this in my career. Again, not saying you can never do it or you should never do it. It's just not common. So I won't spend time on that. New loan, C, this is where you're going to put how much are they getting in financing, if any, right? If they're putting 3% down, 97% is going to be financed. You're going to have to do that math and figure that out, right? Yes. Yeah, you'll hopefully already be in touch with their lender by now because you've gotten a pre-approval letter. You guys probably talked about in other classes. And so you should have an idea of what they're putting down. Does this number have to be accurate? This is one of those weird things that it does not have to be accurate. And you want to tell your buyers this because I've sent the offer to my buyers to review and sign, and they'll look at this and be like, well, we actually don't have 81,000. We'll probably end up with 78,000. That doesn't matter. These numbers, the numbers that matter on this section for sure are this one. What offer price are you doing? And then an estimate or a ballpark of the new loan. Because if this is zero, meaning that they're going to be paying the house in cash, so that at the closing table, they're going to be bringing 634,900. Is that helpful for a seller's agent to know? Very helpful. That can be very attractive if it's a cash offer, right? But if it's not, that's fine. But I would just give your buyers an advanced notice of, just so you know, these are just ballpark figures. Work with your lender to figure out the exact amount of down payment. That can change. That's totally fine. What doesn't change is the amount of the sale, but the amount of down payment, you'll never bring that up again in any paperwork. So it doesn't matter to the seller. But let's say that they're going to do, let's just, for the sake of numbers, they're going to put 20 grand down total, but they've already put 5,000 in earnest money. So now I'm going to put 15,000 here. Because again, the earnest money is basically a portion of your down payment you're just paying a little bit sooner. So this together, this 5 plus 15 is your down payment. So that's 20, which means that oops, and I put this in the wrong spot, didn't I? This is how much they're bringing to the table. So then the new loan is 639 minus 20, right? You can check my math. 619, okay? So those numbers should always kind of add up. These A through E should add up to what's on purchase price. Once in a while, you'll find a mistake there, but so it's important to get that clarified. Did they mean to put a little bit more money down, or did they mean to add a little bit more to the price, or what? So if there's a discrepancy, you should get that figured out. But that's why the purchase price is listed twice, so that there's no confusion that like this is what you're offering. Any questions about this part? Okay. All right. Don't worry, guys. The rest of this is going to go a lot faster because this is kind of the bulk of the page one is like where most of the magic happens, and then the addendums too. All right. So next section, sale of buyer's property. If the buyer is wanting to sell their property because they don't want to keep it as a rental, but they can qualify for the home without having to sell it, what should you put here? Is this offer contingent upon them selling their house, or is it not? In that case, it would be not, because they can qualify. They can buy this house. They're intending to buy this house without having to sell their own house. A lot of times, if that happens, though, they're going to use some of those funds that they get from the proceeds of their sale as a down payment for this one. And that's where this question comes in. If it's 20 grand, I'm not going to go ask for proof of funds as a listing agent. That's fine. Like, I trust that their pre-approval letter from their lender is accurate. As a listing agent, I will call their lender to double check. But if this is, let's say that they pay this in cash and they're not getting a loan, what might I ask for as a listing agent? Proof of funds. Yeah. Simply just, it could be as simple as a screenshot. They can redact the account number so there's no personal information, but I would like to see the name that matches the name of the buyer and enough money in that account to cover the cost of the house or their sizable down payment. Because if they can't show me proof of funds, what might be happening? They might have to get those funds from the sale of a house, but if they've clicked is not, then there's a discrepancy there. So um, either way, most experienced agents will provide that proactively. You're either going to provide as part of your offer a pre-approval letter saying the lender has qualified them for this amount, or a proof of funds saying they have enough money to cover this amount. You as buyer's agents, since we're talking about writing offers, I would always include at least one of those, right? The only times I don't are if we're in a rush, we got to hurry and send this offer. We don't quite have that yet, and I'll let the listing agent know we're working on getting the pre-approval letter. They are approved. We just don't have the letter from the lender yet, or whatever. Then those are the times where I might send it. But other than that, I'd like to have this beforehand. And again, this is helpful to have, like pre-approval letter and the proof of funds might be helpful for you to have before you even write offers, because just handy to have that ready to go so that when you do write an offer, you can send it.
Well, if the account has like 2 million bucks in it.
Yeah.
Don't you not want them to know that you can afford more?
Here's my thought. I've heard of that more, or I've heard of that before, that school of thought, and I kind of used to think that way. I feel like I've adapted a different mentality about that. Just because somebody has the money for something doesn't mean they value at it. So I would just ask, like, let's say that you offer that, you send the $2 million for a $600,000 house and you've shown $2 million proof of funds. If the listing agent comes back and tries to hold you to it a little bit more, like, I would need to know their grounds for doing that. Is it because you see that we have money, or is it you see that you feel like your home is valued at a different price than? Yeah, like justify it. Because if I'm as the buyer's agent and say no, like clearly they have money, that doesn't matter. We're not offering based on that. We're offering this price based on the comparable properties that have sold. So I would just try and stick to that if you need to, but it's up to you.
So. Tries to take it.
I wouldn't say that. I actually wouldn't say that it's rare, because that can happen. And it's not that they're all jerks. They're not. But it's a very emotional process to buy and to sell homes.
That's what I'm.
Yeah. So I'm not totally disagreeing with the fact that you shouldn't send a $2 million proof of funds. Like if they have 650 and this costs 650, let's just show that. That's fine. It may show because then the other school of thought is that there's stronger, like if they have more money, then it's a stronger buyer. There's less chance of them canceling. So it just kind of depends on your methods. But yeah. The same thought happens when you're getting a pre-approval letter, because oftentimes you'll have somebody approved for 750, but then this home is only for 640. And I've heard people say, I don't want to show 750 because then they're going to try and get us to go up on price. I don't think that that's a fair way to go up on price based on what someone's able to do. It's someone's willing and what's fair and what's comparable. So that's where I would try and shift the focus if that were to come up. But I actually, as a listing agent, if I see that somebody is qualified for 750, whereas another person is just barely making it at 640, to me, that other person might seem a little stronger financially, that maybe we have a better chance of closing with that person. I'm not trying to get up in price. So there could be advantages to still showing a higher amount than what is requested here. That's where I've landed, I think, as an agent. But great question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so sale of buyer's property, is this purchase contingent upon them selling? Do they have to sell that home to get that money so that they can then buy this one? Yes or no? Obviously, if you put yes, what are like the strength of your offer? What happens to that? It does go down. Yeah, there are situations, but it does happen pretty frequently, especially when you get a little bit, well, that doesn't even happen all the time. That's not true. It happens. Like people have to sell a home a lot to buy a home. That's a very common thing. What happens here, and the thing that I want you guys to know now is depending on the market, you either want to completely avoid doing this if you can, or you're going to be fine either way. What do you think our market allows for? Do you think our market today is allowing for more offers to be accepted contingent upon somebody selling a home? Or is it more leaning towards these hardly ever get accepted anymore? What do you guys think? You think they don't get accepted as much? It is a little more lenient. So we are in a more buyers friendly market, which means buyers have a little more negotiating power. So I've actually seen more of these where the home is contingent upon selling get accepted than I have in the past. In 2021, when the seller's receiving 20 offers, any offer that came through that says, hey, I want to buy your house, but I have to sell mine first, those are set aside. I'm not even going to look at those because I've got 15 others that don't have to sell a home for. So I'm going to focus on those. But right now, some homes might have more competition than others. That is totally true. But if you do happen to find a home that's been on the market for a couple weeks or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or a couple months, then you may have a better chance of them accepting an offer that first you got to sell your home first. Okay. All right. Okay. Skipping down, I highly recommend reading through all of the REPC a couple times because it is so important to get familiar with this stuff. And it will come second nature to you as long as 7 pages are. It is only 7 pages, and the changes that happen to it are pretty infrequent. So you should be able to memorize and remember most, if not everything that's in here, if you consistently are reading it. So make that a part of your practice, of your habits. Read through different sections, really understand it, ask questions, that kind of stuff. Today, I'm just worried about the blanks, so I'm skipping parts that are not that, especially because it's already 10:30, which I'm so sorry. Do you guys okay on time if we spend another 15 minutes or so? All right. Okay. Possession. So this just refers to at what point does the buyer get to have the keys to the house? At what point can they start moving in and all that stuff? You can put upon recording, which will happen as soon as the county records it. Are you guys familiar with that process, how that works and the timing and everything? A little bit? Okay, let's go over it. So settlement and closing, those are 2 different things, but we oftentimes use those as one word. When we talk about the closing, what comes to your mind? Where are we at? Yeah, the title office signing closing documents, right? That is the closing. When we talk about settlement, that includes the closing, but it also includes after the signing happens, the other things that need to happen is the title company needs to get the money, either from the lender, or if it's cash, they need to get that from the account. They also need to get whatever other down payment money is required and closing costs money. So they have to get all the money first. Then once they have the money, then they can disperse those funds to the other sides. They can pay off the pre-existing loan from the other seller. They can pay commissions. That's a great one for them to do. But also, then they let the county know, say, hey, this person has sold their house, this person has bought this house, and the county needs to record that in the county's recording office. That's the recording part. So there's the funding and the recording that happens after closing. So once the property funds and records, that's when the upon recording would apply. So as soon as the message comes through that, hey, the county has recorded you as the new owner, boom, you can go get their keys. Okay. And you can coordinate beforehand with the listing agent to figure out how to do that. But that would be upon recording. Now, if you do X hours after recording, it's pretty uncommon for me to see this one marked. The most common are either upon recording or certain amount of days after recording. So just so you guys know, always be, you don't want to be certain about this to the point that you're putting your buyers in trouble, because this has happened before where I'm like, okay, the closing's on Friday. We're going to sign in the morning and then we're going to fund and record by the afternoon. And so you guys will get your keys Friday night and you can start moving in. And so the buyer goes and schedules their moving truck. They tell all their neighbors to come and help us move Friday night. And then you get to the closing table and, oh, there's a hiccup real quick with the loan. Let me get this corrected. Okay, it's 2:00 now. All right, we're still waiting for the funds from this other person. So by the time they get that ready, oh, we sent it to the county, but they're closed now. So it's not going to record till Monday. Can you get your keys? No, can't get your keys. So you do have to be a little bit careful as to promising when they're going to get their keys, because if they sign in the morning and the seller also signs in the morning or the day before, and the money comes in on time and it goes to the county recorder's office and they are able to do it quickly, then yes, you could possibly get your keys on Friday, but it's not a for sure thing. So one thing I've found to be a little bit helpful is to try and put your closing dates, your settlement deadlines on Thursdays, or it could be any other day. But if you do it on a Thursday, then you can not, again, still not a guarantee, but with a little bit more confidence, you can say you'll get your keys most likely by Friday. And I always try and be clear with the clients on that so that I'm not putting them in a tough spot, but most likely you get them by Friday. That way it gives you an extra day to work with. And if they happen to, oh, guess what? It actually recorded sooner than we thought it. You get your keys on Thursday. They're happy. You guys have heard the term overpromise, underdeliver? Reverse that because it's the opposite. Underpromise, overdeliver. That's what we want to do. So that's why I like to have settlement deadlines if I can on a Thursday. So it gives them the weekend to move in. So you could put 3 days. Now, at what time after 3 days? Let's say we record, it records on a Friday at 2 o'clock. When do they get their keys? Is it business days? So this one actually specifies it is calendar days. So let's say that would be if it's today is a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So at Monday, they get their keys. What time? 12 a.m. Monday morning? Is it the time that it records? It's actually 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. Any date, and this, I don't know exactly where it mentions this, I think it's at the end. Any date that is referenced in this document that does not have a specific time, by default will be 5 p.m. And this is one of those. Now, sometimes the seller will say, hey, we're out of the house, we're ready, you guys can have the keys a couple hours early, whatever. That's not a big deal. But this is when they can get their keys. So you want to make sure your clients know that. And as part of your offer, you're offering them. Now, this is, as a negotiating piece, this is something I will use because sometimes if a seller is moving from one house to another and they have to be out of this house before they close, but they can't move into their next house before they close on that one, and they needed the funds from this house before they can close on that one, there may be a gap there where they have to move out of their house today, go stay in a hotel for 2 days, have all their stuff in storage or in a moving truck for 2 days, and then they finally can get to the next house. Creates a big problem. So that's one of those things that if planned ahead of time, as part of writing the offer, I can ask the listing agent what their situation is. Maybe they've already moved out. Okay, great. Then I'll put upon recording. Like then the sellers don't need to have extra possession. But if they haven't and they're closing a couple days, maybe we'll give them a few days just to make sure that they have confidence that they can move smoothly without having to worry about all of that. And with your buyers, it's not a big deal if you talk about this at this point. When it becomes an issue is if you're a week away from closing and then you say, oh, I just realized we're having upon recording, the sellers are requesting that we change the date. They've already got a moving truck. Like all of that stuff makes it more complicated. But if you have it at the time of writing the offer, it's not a big deal at all. So in this one, I try to do whatever's best for the sellers if it's within a few days. If it's beyond a few days, is it possible for a seller to stay in the house longer than 3 days after possession? Like what's the maximum time number I can put right here? I guess can and should are probably two different words. If it's more than a few days, I highly recommend you use a different addendum that's called the short-term leaseback agreement that basically says that the seller is going to then rent their house back for another period of time. There's caveats to that because lending will, most buyers that are getting a loan, they're required to move into their home within 60 days. So that means that the maximum time for most leasebacks is going to be a 60-day period, right? And it's a whole rental agreement that says who's paying for utilities and who's paying for what, how much is the rent for each month? Do I pay a deposit? Like all of that stuff is in there. So it's another form that I highly recommend if you're going to be putting a date longer than just a few days. Because if it's 2 weeks, you could put 14 days here, that's fine. But then like who's paying for utilities? Maybe you want the seller to do it. Since you own the home as a buyer, you're going to be paying the utilities upon recording, not upon when you move in. It gets a little complicated. So that's why if it's a few days, nobody's going to say, they use the electricity for 3 days. Now I'm gonna have to pay for that. Like probably nobody's gonna care about that. But if it is a couple weeks or more, then they might. So that's why I recommend the lease back agreement if it's longer. Any questions about this one? Okay, jumping down here, prorations and special assessments. There's two different things here. If there's an HOA, if there's not an HOA, you can either leave it blank or just be safe and put seller. So this is saying who's paying for these two different things. The first one is special assessments. Sometimes HOA companies are short on money and they need to replace all the roofs in the community. So they're going to, in addition to their monthly HOA fee, they're going to charge everybody $400 a month for 6 months so that they can take care of the roofs, right? That's a special assessment. That's an example of a special assessment. So this is saying if there are any special assessments right now with the HOA, who's going to be paying for that after closing? This isn't till closing. This is talking about after closing. Once the buyer owns this property, who's paying for that? So if you put seller and the roof assessment is 6 months, that means that the seller is going to be having to continue to make these payments for 6 months. Is that what you're trying to do? And again, depends on the situation. Most of the time, there is no special assessment, but this is always a good one to find out. The one that what
this gets assessed.
I mean, I can't remember exactly the wording. Yeah, because it says prior to the settlement deadline. If it's any assessments for capital improvements or assessed by a municipal prior to the settlement deadline. Yeah. So that's who's going to be. Probably, I mean, I'm sure it can happen because at some point when they start an assessment, I'm sure there's somebody under contract. So like, I'm sure it does happen. I've personally never gone through that, but title will help you know too if there's special assessments or not. So have a good relationship with your title company and check in with them on that. But this one's the more common one that there is actually a fee. Every HOA community has a change of ownership fee, an HOA transfer fee, different names for it. This is saying who's paying for that. As far as I understand, the state of Utah allows HOAs to charge up to 0.5% of the sales price. So if the sales price was 500,000, that would be what? 2,500 bucks? Yeah, be 2,500 bucks. So it's a significant amount sometimes. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's 250 or 500. So it can be different every time. But this is saying who's paying for it. Is the seller going to be paying for it? Is the buyer going to be paying for it? Or are you going to split it equally or something else? Right. Again, depending on the market, sometimes sellers commonly are paying for this, like right now, or you split it. Or sometimes if you have to be more competitive, then the buyer's going to have to come up with additional funds at closing to pay for this fee. Right. Okay. All right. We don't need to talk about this one. Nobody cares about just put zeros on both of these and you'll be good, right? Just kidding. This is where you're asking the seller to pay your commission. So what number do we put here? First of all, it cannot be higher than what you have on your buyer broker agreement. So remember that. That's why I always just put 3% on my buyer broker agreements. And then I explain if the seller is going to be offering us less, I'll either let you know or I won't worry about charging you extra. But yeah, it can't be higher than that. But this is just another piece of the negotiating puzzle. It kind of goes back to the same idea. If you know you're the only offer, why not put 3%? There's no reason not to. And then in your offer letter or email, you can explain a little bit of why you feel like you deserve the 3%. Just have a little snippet of, I'm an experienced agent, or in your guys' case, you can back the Keller Williams or back if you're on a team and say, I work with this. This is, we're experienced agents or whatever. We can help make sure that they get smoothly to closing. Like most transactions involve two great agents, right? Like there's convincing that has to be done on both sides. It's not just a smooth, perfect process for both sides. So there are going to be hiccups along the road. So a great agent is worth their money for sure. And so you should put 3% most of the time, I think, for right now in this market. And then if you want to negotiate a little bit lower, that's fine. In a counter offer, it's up to you guys. But or you can do a dollar amount if you'd like. Agency disclosure. So let me go here. You go down, and this is how you do it. You copy the listing agent. Sometimes there's a co-agent. You just do whatever the L agent is, not the co-listing agent. And you come over here, you put their name here, click on their name, and you get their number, their license number. Copy that, put it down here. She's representing the seller, and she works for a brokerage across the street. This one. So we'll copy that, put that here, go back, click on that name, and copy the license number and put that there. Yours is already going to be pre-filled for you because you're in your MLS account, so it knows who you are. And I'm representing the buyer, right? Do we ever put both buyer and seller as limited agents? We don't allow that, right? So the way that there is a workaround for it, it's not saying that you can't get paid more for assisting the other side in some ways, but you're not fiduciary to them. And so most of the time, you would be the one as the seller's agent, and then I would put unrepresented right here, and I would copy and I'd put that here, and then just delete these numbers. That's how I would do it if the buyer's going in unrepresented. But okay, now I'm gonna skip down. There's usually nothing else that I ask for seller's disclosures, but sometimes like maybe they have a roof warranty. You can include that here as what items are you asking the seller to provide the buyer of documentation that will help them with their decision and that will help them know more about the home. So it could be a lot of this stuff is by default. Like the sellers are committing to send the CC&Rs and the budget and the HOA documents, and if they have any rentals going on in that property, they'll send you that information, all that stuff. Okay, conditions. First condition is due diligence. The due diligence condition, just to try and go a little bit faster now. You guys know the due diligence condition. This is by when you have to agree on if there are any repairs need to be made and if there is any price changes or concession changes based off of the home inspection or any other inspection that you do. So the due diligence condition is saying that my buyer can cancel and get their earnest money back because of due diligence. If you say is not, what you're saying is that my earnest money, unless specified otherwise later, is non-refundable from as soon as you accept the offer, which means if my buyer cancels even in an hour from now, they lost that $5,000 earnest money. Not recommended, especially in today's market. There's no reason to do this. If and when we get to a market that changes, I'm sure we'll have lots of discussions as we did several years ago on what's the best practices. But right now, you're putting is on every single one of these. It is conditioned. Your buyer has a chance to cancel if they feel like they need to. And it can be for any reason. They don't even have to specify the reason. What they have to specify is, are you canceling based off of due diligence or financing or appraisal conditions? That's all you have to say. We're canceling based on due diligence, and that's it. They may just wake up one day and say that they don't feel good about it. That's happened before. And I've not, and you can cancel. You don't have to give an explanation. The appraisal condition, of course, if they're getting a loan, you're going to most of the time want to mark that it is contingent upon an appraisal. Is it possible to mark that it is not conditioned on an appraisal even though they're getting a loan? It can be, but what that means is if the appraisal comes in low, your buyer has to come up with additional funds as a down payment in order to cover the gap between what your purchase price is and what your appraisal price is. So again, in this market, it's super uncommon for anyone to put is not required for appraisal. So you're putting appraisal on most of these. If it's a cash offer, is there an appraisal? It's up to the buyer, right? They can choose to get an appraisal, but most of them say, don't worry about the appraisal. Because what you're doing as an agent is you're already verifying that, yeah, this price is pretty good. Like compared to these other properties, you're not overpaying for this house. That's really what a savvy cash buyer is going to want to know. Most of them are not going to want to spend the $500 to have an appraiser go and tell them that what you kind of already know. But loans typically require it unless their down payment is significant enough. So just talk to your lenders about that there are occasions where you'll get an appraisal waived, an appraisal waiver. But even then, I wouldn't put it as a condition because you may not know that for certain yet. So as part of writing the offer, it is going to be conditioned upon appraising the home. Then you go down here, 8.3B or A. Is financing required? If it's cash offer, then no financing is required. It's obvious, but most of the time it's going to be B. And then this one I always skip for now. Again, this may change in the market, and I have used this before in different markets, but this basically says, if my buyer cancels, how much money do you get to keep as a seller of that earnest money, that $5,000 earnest money? If they cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline, you get to keep 2,000 of that. You could put something like that, but most of the time I just leave it blank. Leave that one blank. And then we talked about this earlier, additional earnest money. Are you going to be putting more earnest money later? At this point, I would say no, I will not. Addenda. This is where you'll state, are you including addenda as part of your offer? There's these 7 pages of the REPC, but then there's also addenda you could add. And if so, you'll specify what it is. Addendum number 1. Maybe you'll say and 2. Maybe you have 2 there. Or put addendum 1, and maybe it's an FHA or a VA loan, and you got to include that addendum. Or if you have to sell a house, then you may have a short-term lease back addendum 2. This will be the second one. And right up here, you can see which forms you've added already. So we've just added one addendum that's a blank addendum. So we'll just say this. What's that?
I don't think they can reach back out to you. And you'll say you'll keep going up the price to.
Oh, the escalation clause?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, because the escalation is not an official addendum itself. That would be in addendum 1. We would put the verbiage of the escalation clause in addendum 1. Yeah. So, okay, then home warranty. Who's paying for it? Typically, there will be a home warranty on this home. The buyer is going to be ordering it, or in other words, your TC. The buyer gets to choose who to use, and then the seller is going to be paying for it. And I'm going to put $750. It's good to be familiar with what the house needs. If they have 2 water heaters, then that may be an additional cost for the warranty. So kind of get familiar with the warranty plans and what they offer. But $750 is a pretty good number to remember, if nothing else. But yeah, buyer picks it, buyer orders it, seller pays for it, is what we're asking right here. Scrolling down, I've heard, I think it was Clay that mentioned this years ago, and I've just always done it ever since, that if you're working with somebody that's unreasonable, so if a buyer and seller they can't come to an agreement, going to mediation may or may not be helpful. You have to pay for mediation, and if you still can't come to an agreement, then you also have to pay for legal fees, right? So his idea is that if you put it may at the option of the parties, if you know you're working with somebody unreasonable, you may just want to skip mediation, go straight to court. And that's why I've just put may at the option of the parties here for mediation. And then the dates, and then we're done. So I'm going to tell you again, there's no standards. It's all whatever parties can agree on. Every situation's a little bit different. Maybe a seller needs something more or less. Maybe a buyer needs something more or less. But what I would say, if I was a listing agent and I got an offer for this, I would say, okay, yeah, that's normal. Within a week for seller disclosure deadline, this is giving the seller time to gather all the HOA documents that they may need, the CC&Rs, any other documents that they need to provide. So if today is March 25th and I'm writing an offer right now, I might want to put a week, but in preparation for closing on a Thursday, I may put this as a Thursday. Then we've got due diligence deadline. Typically 2 weeks is pretty normal. It can be longer, it can be shorter, but I'm going to go 2 weeks and then put it on a Thursday. Financing and appraisal, 3 weeks is great. 1, 2, 3, put it on a Thursday, and then settlement deadline about 4 weeks. So I'm going to put 4 weeks, put it on Thursday. So that looks pretty normal. About a week for each one is great. The dates to remember here for your clients are at what point, as we have this offer written up, at what point can they cancel for a full refund of their $5,000 earnest money? Yeah, you said Brandon, right? You said C. Yeah, financing and appraisal deadline. April 16th at what time? 5 p.m. So 4:59, you can send a cancellation notice of cancellation to a seller and your buyer will get a full refund of their earnest money. 5:01, you send out notice of cancellation. The seller says, I get to keep that $5,000. You wasted my time. Right? They could potentially come after you for additional damages, but most of the time they just take the money and that's it. So that's a very important deadline for you to remember and to remind your clients to give them a little bit of confidence that, hey, you've got some time to figure things out. You can go check out the neighborhood in the next couple of weeks. You can go, some people like to knock on neighbors' doors and get familiar with that. They can check the schools. I mean, they can do all of their homework here. And then in addition to that, they're of course getting their financing and everything there as well. And so that's their timeline to do that. And then closing by April 23rd. The settlement is on or before this date that both parties have to sign by then. So sellers can often sign several days in advance if they want to, even if the buyer's not closing till April 23rd. The sellers can, if it's convenient for their schedule, they can close a little bit early. Oftentimes, as you're progressing throughout this, it may be beneficial for both sides to say, hey, looks like we're getting done a little sooner. Would you guys be good if we were to, if we were to bump up closing a little bit, and they may be happy with that. So you can change these. Anything here can be changed at any time, as long as both parties agree and you get it in writing. Okay. Next thing.
Backing out for
Yeah.
any reason is the due diligence, right?
Yes.
After that, you have to back out because of final ready, right?
Yes. Sort of. I'm quoting Dean here. Okay. So you can know this is coming with confidence. Let's say that you suddenly found out in week 3, so you're after your due diligence deadline, that, I don't know, that there's an issue with the roof or something happens in the neighborhood. You can claim that it's a financing reason to back out because suddenly your value of that property does not justify the amount that you're supposed to be paying.
Storm comes and now you know there's a leak with the inspector to apply.
Sure. Yeah. Something like that. Like there could still be reasons. So it's like, it's one of those things that's kind of tricky. It's kind of a gray area, I would say, but talk to Dean if you're ever in a situation like this where your buyer wants to cancel, just make sure you're clearing things with him. But the way I see it is that my buyer has till April 16th to cancel for a full refund. That's just how it is. Because on the form, it's not saying that this person just suddenly doesn't qualify. It's not that. Could be rates may have changed between that time and maybe they've gone up a little bit and now suddenly you don't want to pay that amount, right? Like it could still be kind of any reason, but you could argue that any reason is still a financial reason because you're going to be paying money for that. And so if your perception of the value is down, then that changes. Maybe it's a life situation, something in your life happens. You lost some income, or I don't know, could be anything. So
my last question about this, how would you compress this if it's an all cash offer with no?
Good question. So if it's an all cash offer and I'm not going to do a financing and appraisal deadline,
Then we don't even have to go through.
I just delete that. Yeah. So all I would change if it's an all cash offer is not put any date here on the financing appraisal. Chances are they still want to have a due diligence deadline. So I would highly recommend them still getting a home inspection and checking out the house and all that. But then I'd go up here and I would change the financing condition to no financing required and the appraisal to is not contingent. So then I would leave the due diligence deadline there and then those ones I would change.
Then if they wanted to close within 7 to 14 days. Press to whatever.
Yep. Yeah, put this here. You could tighten up this deadline. I've definitely done it where I've had inspections done within a week and tighter due diligence deadline. If you're going up against competition and the seller's in a rush, you can say, hey, we're going to act quickly. We're going to get these things done really quick. And if you say that, you got to be sure and do it. And you call the home inspector like that day and say, hey, we need you to get out here within a couple days. Because if they say they go through the house and say, hey, I recommend a plumber coming out now to verify this issue that I found, that might take another day or two for them to get out. So the sooner you get the home inspection, the more time you have to deal with those types of things.
Competition for this house, but
yeah,
it's also vacant.
Sweet. So you already know being vacant, 9 times out of 10, sellers are going to be wanting to close sooner. Yeah. Yep. Okay, good question. All right, last one here, offer and time for acceptance. Okay, this is one that a lot of agents misunderstand, so I want to clearly tell you guys so you don't make this mistake. First, let's say the common thing to do is like next business day by 5 o'clock, but it can be sooner. What would you think is a problem if I say today's the 25th and I want these people to respond by 10 p.m. tonight? What might that cause? Yeah, like they may not have time to get to it. They may not have time to look over. I mean, this is a 7-page document, guys. Like this is not like read this paragraph and then tell me yes or no. Like there's a lot to go into this. So they need some time to consider it. But also they may feel pressured to hurry and answer by 10 o'clock. And a lot of people, when you're dealing with real estate, when they feel pressure, they'd rather just ignore it and not do it than to put themselves in a position where they may have done something that is going to be hard for them to overcome. So don't put pressure on them. You'll find some agents try and do that. I've just not had good experiences when that happens. So 5 o'clock by the next business day is fine. That's the most common thing. Sometimes if it's like early enough in the day, I may put noon by the next business day just to try and get things done a little quicker without still making sure they feel a lot of pressure. But then sometimes also they may be dealing with 6 siblings that are selling the parents' house who have passed on, and they're going to need like 2-3 days just to get signatures from these people. So sometimes that could be another question for the seller when you're asking the seller's agent on that initial phone call about the seller situation. Another question I would ask there is, when's a good response time for you guys? Is tomorrow at 5 okay? And they may say, yeah, that's great. Or they may say, we would need a little extra time. Okay, so here's the part that I'm telling you that a lot of times is misconcepted. That's not even a word. I just made something up today. So when you send this in, let's say that tomorrow, it hits tomorrow, and we put this as tomorrow, right? And it's 5:01, and they sign the offer and send it back to you. Are they late? They are late, right? They're after this time. But chances are, if they've taken that long, a lot of times they'll be sending you a counter offer. So let's say at 5:01 the next day, they send you a counter offer for your buyer to sign. Do you have to address the fact that they responded to this late? Okay, that's the key word is this is an offer and time for acceptance, meaning exactly how this offer is written up, this is by when I want you to respond. But guess what? If they're at 5:01 and they don't want to change anything here, all they have to do is say, buyer and seller agree to the terms of the original contract or something like that, and then have everybody sign on that one. That's fine. But this is not a response deadline. So what I mean by this is sometimes you'll send this offer, the seller will get it, and they'll want to change something. They'll want to send you a counter offer, right? They don't have to send that counter offer before 5 o'clock the next day. Yeah. Yeah, because on that counter offer, guess what it has at the very bottom? We'll go to an addendum and so I can show you. Time for acceptance for this counter offer now. So even if this was given later, it's still tied to that first contract. You don't have to get everything signed before that 5 o'clock deadline that you already had on that one. Again, this example that I have, we've been working on this offer since Saturday, and we've kind of been going back and forth and negotiating and talking. Some of it's been on the phone. They sent us a counter offer, talked on the phone again. We sent them another counter offer. So like we've gone back and forth a bit. And of course, our original acceptance deadline is well past, but each counter offer has its own acceptance deadline. And at some point, we're going to get this together and have it accepted, and then we all get to move on. So that's kind of the misconception that I see a lot. All right, the last thing I'll touch on is this addendum. This one's the blank one, where it has a lot of available clauses that you can just load right into it. So one of them was an escalation clause is one of them. It's not on here, but Dean has his own verbiage for that. And so you guys should have access to that in the important documents link. where he has his phrases of what to use, and you can just copy and paste his verbiage for the escalation clause, is what it's called. There's also for you, I just forgot your name. Elias, yes, thank you. For you, with your cash offer, anytime you're waiving an appraisal, a financing, or a due diligence contingency, there's a document that Dean is asking us to fulfill as part of our compliance to make sure that the buyer understands those consequences. Because what has happened before is that an agent will go in and is not contingent on appraisal, and the buyer doesn't fully understand what that really means. They don't understand the rights that they're actually giving up. So Dean created a document to make sure that we have them sign that, so that they are fully understand, and that they have an initial there that says that they understand what the consequences of them waiving that is. I still would do that because it's a cash offer. Who? Yep. Yeah. So it's not a bad thing. It's just, these are just protections that we have to make sure that we do things the right way, that buyers are understanding of what we're doing, and that we're all good. But like, I'll just show you one, because this is a super common one, especially now, is the closing costs addendum. If you grab it, drag it over here, drop it, and then click load, it'll automatically put that verbiage right here so that you can ask for closing costs from a seller. So let's say that we're going to ask for $15,000 in seller paid concessions that can go towards any of these items. It can go towards a permanent reduction of the rate. It can go towards a temporary rate buy down. It can go towards buyer's closing costs covered through title company. It can be their closing costs for the loan. It can be any of those things. Can't be down payment. Seller can't contribute towards a buyer's down payment. But those are the other things that it can be used for.
Sure change everything.
What's that?
But sure change everything.
Yeah. And then lastly, if any, like it says, any unused portion of this contribution from the lending and from all those other, let's say that there were only $12,000 in closing costs, and you covered all that, you don't need a rate buy down, then you can use the rest of it to reduce the purchase price. That's what you're agreeing to. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, so.
It is. Yeah, so concessions is just pretty much. Yeah, that's a great thing to clarify. So it's not like the seller has to come to the closing table with an additional $15,000 here. It's just that this $15,000 will be taken from their proceeds from the title company before they give the money to the seller. So the title company pays their pre-existing mortgage. They pay any other liens that are against the property, anything that needs to be paid for. They pay commissions for us, and then any leftover money goes to the sellers, right? So this would be an additional thing that they would also then pay closing costs or concessions, and then give the rest to them. Yeah, great question. So, sorry, give me send one text, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. Now, if I'm sending this addendum in along with my offer, I'll just want to make sure that this time matches the exact time that I have for acceptance deadline on the original offer. And then at the top, you'll want to clarify, is this an addendum, meaning this goes along with the offer, or is this a counter offer, meaning I'm changing something that happened in our previous communication, essentially, with this. But you'll repeat the name, the seller, and the address at the top. So this just always ties together. So it's always in the same, knows which offer you're talking about. Any questions about this stuff? There's a lot to it, right? And we went kind of fast, even though I took a long time. But yeah, I think as far as like other messages or takeaways, this is all part of negotiation. It's important for you to understand the market. It's important to understand what's common and for what happens to a particular listing, and to have that conversation. That's a critical piece. And to talk to other agents in the office, because that's when we start to see shifts happen, is as we're talking to agents, because even the higher producing agents, they may feel a shift in the market a little bit, but as a whole, we can discuss and feel it. Is that just some random thing that's going on in your business, or is this a trend that's happening for all of us? And as we start to see those shifts, it totally changes how we write offers because we always have our client's best interest at heart, but there's no purpose in trying to get a buyer to buy a house using today's strategies if the market shifts to where it's a seller's market and we're asking still for closing costs and we're asking for, the sellers to pay for the HOA transfer fee and all of that when we're just going to be rejected every single time. So we got to kind of stay on top of that stuff. But again, right now it is a buyer's market. So it's not to say that every seller is going to accept all the terms and conditions that you're trying to propose. But I would lean a little heavier into getting your buyer some of these things paid for from the seller because it's just so common right now. There's no reason not to in most cases. So any questions, any final things that you guys want to discuss or talk about? I would highly recommend writing your offers, especially for the first few that you do, sending it to an agent that you trust that can look over it for you. Maybe a TC, if you're working with a TC, they'd probably be happy to do that. Just because, I've definitely received offers and I hope, no, I would never have sent an offer that was inaccurate or that I had anything wrong with it, right? But sometimes you get an offer and you immediately know like, okay, this must be a newer agent, right? There's nothing wrong with being a newer agent, but if you're sending an offer that makes someone think that without even knowing you, then chances are they're also going to think what? Yeah, yeah, exactly. They can negotiate hard against you, or that they can that this person doesn't know what they're doing, so maybe I don't trust them, right? So we don't want you to feel that way. And again, with Keller Williams, there's no reason not to because we have so many people that are willing to help you out and make it look professional, make it look like it's really done really well, and get you guys to learn a lot faster, so that you're not those agents that they worry about. So, all right, let me just double check this. Do you guys know if you have access to this already? You probably haven't seen it. I think Ritz sends this to you. But I figured I would tell you kind of my process and how I go about it today, and then you guys can look over this on your own to see if there's additional things that you learn as you go over that. But I'll find out how you get this, but it's the offer field helper. So just be on the lookout for that. But other than that, thank you guys for coming today. Well, this was from the Rise class. They send this to the teachers. And so this